to Rare Reality, a podcast powered by Jordan's Guardian Angels. I'm Christina Janes. I'm Director of Outreach and Content Development for JGA, and I am joined today by a very special guest. Kelley Coleman is here with us. She's an author, she's a mom. You do all the things, Kelley, and I have to tell you, I was so excited that you said yes to sitting down with us for this podcast. This is amazing.
Well, it's amazing what you do. We have a son who has a yet undiagnosed genetic syndrome.
Yeah.
And so to find community within other disability spaces, parenting spaces, rare disease spaces, is wonderful. And the community that you have created here is somewhere where it's like, oh, okay, we feel like even though we
Yes.
don't have that diagnosis, like these are our people.
Yep. You found your community, right? And there's the rare disease space is so special because it brings so many people together, whether you're diagnosed, undiagnosed, whatever that may look like for you. It's amazing to see the camaraderie there too and to know you're not alone. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So, you wrote this incredible book and when Candace Huber told me about it and she was like, "You have to read this book. You have to have her on for a podcast." And uh, I thought, okay, let me dive in. Let me see what it's about. Let's see what we're doing, but it's everything no one tells you about parenting a disabled child, your guide to essential systems, services, and supports, which when I saw the title, I thought I'm going to be reading for a while.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, Kelley, this was one of the best reads I've had in a long time. It's a phenomenal book.
Thank you. And my intention with this is for it to not be boring, and the title sounds like it could be super boring. I
Mm-mm.
don't want to read something that feels like homework. I
No.
wanted this whole book to be like you are having a conversation with a friend who's,
Right.
a few years down the journey. And so making it conversational and accessible and usable, the fact that this book hasn't been written yet is like, man, I could have used this a decade ago. This would have
Isn't that the
been
truth? Yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, thank goodness. I mean, you've opened a whole lot of doors for a whole lot of families. And so we kind of try to do here is to bring something new and interesting and different to our families. And then if it, in the meantime, can get out to other families in the rare disease space, let's do it. Right. Like things that are helpful, things that are useful. And this book is one of those things. But I want to dive into it and get into the nitty gritty of the book itself. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family, and you mentioned still being in the undiagnosed space too. So to tell us about you.
Yes. So, as you mentioned, I'm an author, I'm an advocate, I'm a mom, I'm lots of things. Before I had kids, my life was, I got paid to come up with ideas for talking animal movies, which is a ridiculous job, but super fun.
So
So,
fun.
that was
Yes.
my life before. And also, I think speaks to why the book is engaging and conversational because that's the world I'm coming from. So I'm in Los Angeles. I have two amazing kids. Our older son, Sean, is 12 and he does not have disabilities. He plays the tuba and the electric guitar and does magic and like plays basketball with his friends and he checks so many boxes.
Yeah.
Our younger son, Aaron, who is disabled, he's 10 and he checks even more boxes. He's the kid who applauds for airplanes, high fives everybody at the grocery store, and is just the mayor of everywhere he goes. In addition to all of that, he has an undiagnosed genetic syndrome, and we've done all the tests up through and including full genome sequencing. And within that umbrella, the presentation of his syndrome looks like epilepsy, cerebral palsy, autism, cortical vision impairment, microcephaly, feeding tubes, sensory processing, developmental disability, intellectual disability. He's he he's kind of an overachiever. He's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll just check all those boxes. Cool. Um, and that said, I love talking to people in this community because the look on your face when I say these things isn't, oh, you poor thing. It's, oh, he high fives everybody at the grocery store. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because in this world, we understand. And I think, certainly on my journey and many others, we come to realize rather than starting out realizing that disability in and of itself isn't just automatically a tragedy.
No,
And my child isn't tragic. Like he's awesome.
it's amazing. Yeah.
He's amazing. I don't think he is distressed or sad or whatever about his
No.
own disability. He's just he is his personality and disability as part of that. He
Yeah.
is not disability.
Right.
Like
There's
it's
so much more to bring to the table than just that.
yes.
There's so much about they're people and they live in their own it,
Yes.
there's so much loveliness about it all.
Yes. Because as humans, none of us are defined by one thing.
No. No. Isn't that great?
It is kind of great.
I mean,
And
I think
boy, I
it's
wish
great
somebody
from,
told me that.
I mean, that's the thing is that I think that there's, if you look beyond the paper that the doctor handed you and you look to the true people and their little faces, you can learn so much from them.
Yes. And in the beginning of our journey, and I've talked to way too many families that this where this is identical, we're basically told to go home, Google, and cry.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I
And
mean,
we're not
that's
told,
for so many of our JGA families, that's what they said. There's a Facebook group. They might be able to help you.
yeah, good luck finding that. I don't remember what it's called.
No, but what? I mean, that's why these resources are so important because this community has to come together. We have to come
Mhm.
together and we have to be there to support because if
Yes.
without, oftentimes you're on this journey by yourself and you don't
Yeah.
have to be.
Mhm.
You really don't
You
have to be.
you do not have to be, and by the time that you realize that you're not on an island all by yourself and the other half of the island is populated with people,
Yeah.
you've just like been through the ringer so much. And I'm on such a mission to change how parents enter into the world of disability. I think the statistic is that over 80% of disabled children are born into a family where their parents do not share that disability.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there are disabled parents, they may or may not share the disability with their child. And most of us are like, whoa, surprise. And now I am a parent caregiver for forever, and it's a full time job, and I'm leaving all this other stuff behind. And wholeheartedly and without looking back, because my kid is the most important thing.
Yeah.
But I'm on such a mission to change the like fear and terror and uncertainty, because if educators, social workers, if everybody had a framework
Hmm.
for first not saying, oh, I'm so sorry, I have terrible news, but saying, here's information, I'm giving you this information, let's
Hmm.
use this to serve your child, and then taking the parents' lead from there, but also saying, here is a book. Here is how to find your local parent training and information center so you can get information customized for your state, county, city location. Um, I
Yeah.
believe if all of these professionals just had two sentences worth of resources, it changes from go home, Google, and cry to this is information. You are on a different path and you are not alone on that path, and you got this.
Yep. And we're going to be just fine. You're going to be just fine. Is that
Yeah.
what led you down the path to writing this book? Because you knew that, did you see the need immediately?
Um, I swore for years I would never write this book. I knew I needed it, but I was like, oh, that sounds so boring. And I'm a writer and I write about talking animals, and that sounds way more fun.
Yeah.
Um, but the path to writing this book was a combination of a tough and sleepless night with epilepsy and vomiting and like all the stuff, and then me treating myself to a cup of coffee the next day and just like sitting outside and just crying and realizing I needed to write this book,
Yeah.
partly because we had just been thrown back into a hard place after months of being in a good place, and also partly it is so infuriating that there is such an imbalance in access to information and services.
Yeah.
And depending on which demographic boxes you check, your kid will get more or less. Your
Hmm.
location, your race, your income level, your ability to speak English. And that is so infuriating because it doesn't have to be that way. And so many of these resources exist, but are so hard to understand. And there are many great websites and resources, but the fact that it took me a decade to figure
Hmm.
all this stuff out to get to where I am now, I check many demographic boxes that equal privilege, and one of those boxes is time. I
Mhm.
was able to step away from so much and spend the last decade fully immersing in this in a way that many are not. And so the thing that really pushed me to write this book was literally crying in my coffee,
Yeah.
sitting outside one day.
It's time. Yeah.
Plus the fact that knowing that I can save people time and money and energy, and all of our kids can benefit from that.
Yeah.
Like, that is exciting to me.
Absolutely. And I think that it's so different than the books that
Mhm.
are out there. First of all, there's not a lot out there that's even remotely close to this. Let's start there. But
Yeah.
it's written in a way that is that anybody, even if you don't think you have time to sit, I was like, I don't have time to read this book. Okay, I'm going to make
Yeah.
time to read this book,
Yeah.
right? But once I opened it and started reading it, I was in it because
That's
it's
great.
so easily accessible. It brings in experts, it brings in your stories, it brings in other people's stories. There's actionable items to get things done. There's
Mhm.
helpful templates. It has everything. I mean, it's a one-stop shop for those who need it most, and it's fast.
Yes, it's fast, and also there's an audiobook as
Yes.
well, so listen to it in the car, and I'm all about what are those action items, and each chapter, as you mentioned, has these different sections, and one of those, excuse me, are the bullet points of what worked for me, and
Yes.
then also, here's what you need to ask yourself. I'm not saying what worked for me is the thing you have to do. Nope.
Mm-mm.
What I'm saying is here's stuff that I've road tested and proven.
Yeah.
Here is how you can build this journey for what works for yourself and your child and your
Mhm.
family. And like you said, the templates and the worksheets and all of that. I wish I could say, here's a solution that works all the time for
Right.
everybody. But my kid isn't like your kid. We don't live in the same state. We don't have the same family dynamics.
Right.
And it's all about how do you build your journey, and you don't have to read it in order. And if you first want to tackle the future care plan for your child, skip to that chapter. If you
Yeah.
have to get reimbursement from your insurance company and you're dreading that phone call, skip to that chapter
Yeah.
and it walks you through how to do the phone call. Of if you have an IEP meeting next week, like what do you need? Flip
Mhm.
through to there, and the appendix has the full interviews with all the experts. It has websites and resources and everything. So that we can just stop. Like, we are all reinventing the same wheels, and
Yes.
we got to knock that off,
And please,
right?
let's help each other, right? Let's get to
Yes.
this point where it's like, here, just use this.
Yeah.
This is what works.
Mhm.
As I was reading through it, one of the quotes that you had in there that resonated with me was from your friend Jill. She said, "We're all in the same ocean, but we're in very different boats." And I thought that that will resonate with so many people. And you come back to it a number of times throughout the book, like same ocean, different boat, right? But it's the truth because we're all in this in some form here, right? But we can all do things together to make it easier, to make it better, to make it less alone.
Yes. And she was specifically referring to parenting kids with disabilities.
Right.
Her son has a rare syndrome as well, and there is so much crossover, and we are in the ocean of, we are parent caregivers for a life of children who will not be fully independent ever. But our boats are real different, and with Jill specifically, she's dealing with XYZ and I'm dealing with ABC. And so it's like, we're waving at each other from our respective canoes.
Right.
Yeah.
But it works because there's commonality in what you're doing and seeing.
Yes, and I absolutely, and certainly as we were sending this book out to publishers, I was a major publisher swooped in with an offer, which was terrific. And I also got feedback of, that sounds lovely, but you can't possibly write a book that speaks to all disabilities.
You can.
And I'm like, well, actually, you can, because we all need to financial plan in a different
Yes.
way. We
And
all need to
also
access social services.
read the book. We did that. That's
We
what you
did
did.
that.
That's where you really did hit the nail on the head in that way. And I think there's also a section in there. I mean, every chapter has this sort of relatable story, right? Writing a letter to yourself and what you wish you knew then. Um, I laughed at some of them. I got teary-eyed at other ones.
Yeah.
It really did. It brought in so many different walks of life and so many people who are dealing with different things. And I felt like there's gonna be a lot of parents out there who that's gonna stick with.
It is, and like you said, it is such a diverse range of letters and parents sourced,
Yeah.
and with the parents, with the experts, many of them are disabled themselves. And so we are also getting wisdom and expertise on a high level about disability from disabled people, which why did it take me so long to figure that out?
Yeah.
That I was not learning in the beginning about disability from actual disabled people. And I was like, oh, I remember the show The Facts of Life, and Blair's cousin had cerebral palsy. And like,
Yeah.
she's great, but like, I was just like making stuff up. And so, of course,
Right.
we're going to get it wrong when we're not actually getting our information from people with lived
Yeah.
experience. And so many of us just spend years, kind of digging ourselves into this hole unnecessarily because we're not actually in community with disabled people, and
Right.
what a mess that is.
Well, and is that how you approached it in finding your experts and finding your families? Was that you find I mean, did you know all of these people? How did you go about this? How did you find everybody that you knew you wanted to include in this book?
Yes, so I reached out to many people. There are a handful of people, whether it's the parents or the experts in the book, that I had a relationship with, but for the most part, I did not know these people in advance.
Mm.
And I reached out, and especially some of these high level experts like Judy Human, who
Right.
unfortunately passed last year. She's known as the mother of the disability rights movement, and she is a huge force and presence in this world. And I was like, "Oh, she's never gonna respond to me." And I sent her an email and she responded that afternoon. And so, so many people that I reached out to basically saying, "So I've never published a book and you don't know who I am, but can I interview you and you'll be in my book and I promise it'll be good."
Yeah.
So many people immediately got it and believed in it because they understood the necessity of this. And if we are going to make progress with our kids, and then big picture, with chipping away at ableism, with disability rights and advocacy, we need to educate the parents and give them an entry into this world that isn't fear,
Mhm.
so that it's not scary to say, "Oh, I'm not going to be the one taking up all the space here. I'm going to let the individuals who are disabled speak. And then I'm going to support them because I'm not afraid to like figure this out."
Yeah.
And um many of the experts, again, I wanted to have disabled experts in here, and I didn't just choose them. "Oh, you're disabled. You must know what you're talking
Right.
about." I chose them because they are the best experts and they are the high level people who are having these conversations. And I mean, I even learned so much as I was writing this book, and I was literally taking notes and like, "Oh man, I gotta appeal that insurance claim, and
Yeah.
here's how to do it." And it works. The book works. It
See?
saves you money. There you go.
Yes, and that's exactly it, is at the end of the day, look, hey, it worked.
It
Amazing.
worked.
Um, you talk a lot about the word disabled, um, and why we need to get rid of special
Mhm.
and why we need to start making that evolution now. I know it's a difficult conversation. It's hard to make that shift for a lot of people, but talk about why that's so important.
Mhm. So language is so important because number one, and the most objective reason, is disability is the word that is used in law.
Mhm.
My child gets protections and services because he is disabled, not because he has special needs or special this or differently abled that. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the most basic and objective. For me, I have been on a language and learning journey and will be forever. And there will come a time when language used in this book is outdated. And that's
Mhm.
great because it should evolve. And the evolution is coming from disabled leaders speaking up. And I will never vilify someone who uses the word special or says special needs because that's what
Right.
we all grew up with. It is institutionalized in special education, special needs trusts, like it will be there for our lifetimes. But looking at the language that the disability community has chosen, and the word is disability, I have never spoken with a disabled individual who says, oh, I prefer special needs.
Mhm.
But what I have heard over and over is that when we are using terms other than disability, it's unconsciously saying disability is bad, so I can't say that. I can't say my child is disabled because disabled means less than. And the more we use disabled and say the word disability as a neutral description,
Mhm.
my kid is not an inspiration and a superhero because he's disabled. Nope, he's a 10-year-old boy who wants to go play ball in the driveway. He is not tragic and pitiable because he's disabled. Nope, he's the mayor of Trader Joe's. Like, it is just a fact of who he is. And the more that we can use that, the more it lets the air out of the balloon.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel pandering in the way that special needs can really start to sound childlike in many ways.
Mhm.
I don't know any adult who says I prefer to be referred to as someone with special needs. And you hear quite the opposite. And I have not communicated with all disabled people, and people can choose whatever language they want for themselves. But as parents, we can do our children the service of saying the word disability and the fact of being disabled is not inherently undesirable and negative. It's
Yeah.
just Tuesday.
Yeah. It just is what it is.
Yes.
And I thought it was interesting what you first said about in the law,
Hmm.
that's what it says.
Yes.
So start referring to it in a way that
Hmm.
makes it very clear. And I also think that you touched on that too in terms of the law
Yes.
in your section about IEP.
Hmm.
I don't know where you were 6 years ago, but man, I wish you had been with me because when we started doing IEPs for my son, I was like, what is this? What,
Yes.
and we have an amazing team. Please don't get me
Mhm.
wrong. The
Yes.
team is fantastic. They've
And
been
we do
great
too
all
now.
the way
Yep.
through. But holy smokes, you get into this situation and all of a sudden there's language and you're signing things and it's it's the wild west. And if
Yeah.
you're not prepared, oh, wow. So
And
thank you
yes,
for writing this because it's
yes,
so necessary.
yes. And when you are launched into this, and it
Yes.
is Wild West for the parents, because the people sitting across from the table, you across the table from you, they do this all the time. They have
Yes.
training in this, they have expertise, and parents, including myself, often come into it from a place of total ignorance and feeling like I don't know, what's available for my child, much less what my child's rights are.
Mhm.
And that's why the IEP chapter was actually the first chapter I wrote, and I think it's the longest one, and I had to
Yes.
cut it way down. Um, because partly just saying what are the basics and what are the terms and what are we even going to talk about in this meeting, to just familiarize yourself with that makes it
Yes.
feel so much less intimidating to be sitting across the table from experts who are probably approaching it from a list of things that are wrong with your kid
Exactly.
instead of approaching it from strengths. And we now have a great IEP team. We've had some terrible teams in the past, and parents can expect a full range of experience with that. It's
And
not automatically going to be wonderful or terrible.
right. And I think I don't know about you, but you have this we have a team that eh, is we're thrilled with
Yes,
now, but we've
us
had
too.
some teams before where you have a happy-go-lucky interaction with them on a regular basis. You get into an IEP meeting and their IEP hats go on and everyone is so
Yeah.
serious and the
Mhm.
whole tenor changes and it's like, oh, And then you feel like you have to sign. And one of the greatest lessons I learned from a friend of mine who's an incredible advocate was don't sign anything that day. Take it home and ingest it. And you said the same thing again in this book.
Mhm.
Take it home, take a minute.
Yes, and even even now, even though we've known our team for a while,
Yeah.
every single meeting, at the top of the meeting, I say, thank you guys so much for being here. As you know,
Yeah.
we will not be signing anything in the room other than the attendance form that says we were here. We will not be signing this in the room, and I will need to take this home and read it. So thank you for knowing that in advance. So
Yeah.
there's no pressure because I've already declared
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. And
Set
if
your
anybody
boundaries.
were to try and get me to sign it, I'd be like, oh no, we already covered that.
Yeah.
Like, we're good.
Done. Yeah. It's not gonna happen today.
Oh, and there have been instances, again, not with our current team, but with a
Yeah.
past team, where they say one thing in the meeting and then another thing is written into the IEP.
Mhm.
Especially with us, we've seen that with the percentage of time spent in a general education class. Our son presently spends his days split between a special ed class and general education. And we talked about in the room all of the times and the places and the ways that his schedule would be split between the two in the room, and it sounded great. We got home, and the box that listed the percentage of time outside of general education was 100%.
Mhm.
If I had signed that, he never would have set foot in a general education classroom, and I would have just agreed to that
Yes.
because of what they told me.
Knowledge is power though in these situations. And if you know that you have the options to say, thank you,
Mhm.
thank you so much. I'm grateful to our team because they just send it in an email and say, take a look
Yes.
at it, get it back to us as soon as you can.
Yep.
I'm so grateful for that because it takes the pressure off. But there are so many parents who are going to be entering into this realm and they don't know that they can say that. They don't know that they can take a pause and they don't know the steps and what you should know ahead of time. I mean, it was it's an incredible chapter in this book because we're all going to do the same thing. We're all going to do this. So read it and know what you need to know.
Yes. And don't be afraid to stop at any point and ask questions. And when the offer is being made of service hours and placements and all the things, I literally say, can you show me exactly where that is written in the IEP? Give me the page number. I'm going to highlight it so that I am certain I am clear. So when I'm going home, I can see, oh, this many hours of speech therapy were offered. It is it in the class? Is it outside of the class? And IP documents, I still am like, can we hire a graphic designer? Because this is so hard to read. And I've been at this for years and
Yeah.
I'm good at it.
Yeah.
And it's infuriating that if it's hard for me and I'm good at annoying paperwork, how does anybody have a shot at understanding everything that is on the table for their kid?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can make you feel like you are I mean, at least from our standpoint, we were like, I'm sorry, what?
Yes.
You know what? Can we go over it? Let's start again. I need another hour, because I don't understand what just happened here.
Yep. Nope. By the way,
Yeah.
if you and I sit down and write a book about IEPs, it'll be
Yeah.
called, I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Because
Yes.
that
Perfect.
sums it up.
The
Yep.
next idea is on the table, right?
I love
Um,
it.
on a lighter note, I loved the theme park checklist. Bless you for going through that because that is something that we can take with us. It's
Yes.
tangible. Your mental health checklist. These are things that are so helpful. I mean, these are just there and they seem so basic, but they're so helpful.
Yes. And we could all sit down and take the time to come up with all the checklists. But again, let's stop reinventing the same wheels. These
Yes.
have been sitting on my computer. And whether you're going to the zoo or Disneyland or the park, like the checklist applies. And
Yeah.
how do we just like put these systems in place? And whether it is a mental health checklist to figure out, like, oh, I'm depressed. Oh, I've been depressed for the last decade.
Oh,
Got it. Like, oh, of whatever it is. Like there are systems that you can have in place that make all of this doable. And I think that's what this comes down to, is this life as a parent caregiver, we need to find a way to make it sustainable
Yep.
long term.
Yep.
And so much of it doesn't feel sustainable.
No, it doesn't. And it feels scary sometimes too.
Yes.
That's the
Mhm.
thing, is that if we can make things just this much easier, and for those who are listening and not watching this right now, showing a very small amount, but a very, very small amount easier. And that's not proper English, but we'll just go with it.
I
I
think
mean,
it
it's,
is.
if we can do that, then I feel like that's a win, because then it eliminates 35 minutes from somebody's day. I mean, it's,
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly is like, I think it is quantifiable how much time you can save by
yeah,
having these things in place. And even if you use that 35 minutes to be like, I'm going to catch up on Downton Abbey or like whatever it is,
anything. Yeah.
like that could be the thing that like gets you through the week and makes you feel like a human.
Yep.
And like
Exactly.
we lose that. And
Yes.
we don't talk about this being scary and hard often and openly enough, because supposed to, quote unquote, talk about how beautiful this parenting journey is and aren't we blessed that our kids have disabilities. And I feel like there's stuff about disability that serves my child. Also, like seizures don't serve my child. I sure wish he didn't have those. And if I told you all the joys of epilepsy, I would be lying and I would be doing a disservice to myself and my life experience and to my
Yeah.
child's experience.
100%. I mean, that's the thing, is that it can be both things. It can be really beautiful and it can be incredible. And you get so much out of it. And these children are amazing. And they are all of those things,
Yeah.
right? They can be the mayor of Trader Joe's. But
Yep.
there's a lot to this that keeps us up at night. And at 3 a.m, you're thinking about that checklist of whatever it is that you need to do. And it's hard. And it's
It,
okay to say it's hard.
yes. And talking to some of the experts in my book who are disabled themselves, and I feel so fortunate that they were giving me permission to ask all the questions.
Yeah.
And I was even asking, like, is it okay to say that disability is hard? And I kept hearing over and over, it is not only okay, but it is necessary. And when we talk about the hard things, we're able to separate, like, loving my kid is not hard.
Mhm.
He as a human is not a hard, challenging, awful human in the way that epilepsy is hard and challenging and awful, or these other things can be. And when we talk about the full reality of things, and our kids are also able to say, like, I am not the problem. Me as a human is not the problem. It's the fact that there is no curb cut here.
Right.
And if we want to take this path to go to the park, we have to go out into a busy street. Like that's the problem. Not that my kid wants to go to the park or that he's an occasional he's a part-time wheelchair user, not the fact that he was not able to walk to the park today.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Biggest surprise for you in writing this book? What was that?
The biggest surprise to me in writing it is that it was fun. I didn't think
See?
this would be fun.
Yeah.
I thought it would be boring and dreadful. Um, the fun of it and the experts who agreed and so readily agreed, and so many of these very high level people, how instantly they believed in and understood the need for this meant the world to me, and really felt so validating that parent caregivers need this and people see the need.
100%. I mean, there is absolutely a need. You're filling that void, and along the way, I think interjecting so much about yourself and about your family, and the pictures are beautiful. I mean, the octopus costume, really, I was like, oh, stop. Frame that all over your house,
It is framed in our house. We take our Halloween costumes very
I
seriously in our
thought so, yes.
and whether it's the octopus or the explorers being eaten by snakes
Yeah.
or the hammerhead sharks, like whatever it is, and also is a challenge in accessibility
Yeah.
because if both of our kids want to dress up as robots or man-eating plants, we need to build a costume where they can both walk safely and aren't going to be bothered by sensory things and be able to move freely and safely. And so, yeah, so accessibility is part of all the things, and especially our Halloween
I
costumes.
love them. They're beautiful. And
Thank you.
kudos to you guys for doing all of that work too.
Thank you. You know what? It's my creative outlet every
Yeah.
year, and our kids get to be whatever they want to be for Halloween. They just have to help make them. And for our older son, it might be sitting at the sewing machine or getting out the hot glue gun or the
Yeah.
paper mache. And for a younger son, it might be just going to the fabric store and picking which color the dragon should be. And for kids who do not yet have a fully developed communication system, like my younger son, taking those opportunities in everyday life to show him that he has agency and a say in his own life is a really big deal. It might not seem like a big deal to have him pointing at which color of fabric we're going to get for the dragon costume, but it is training me and it is training him that even though you are a complex communicator who cannot yet communicate everything that you think, I care about what you have to say, and I am starting to give you agency in your own life from an early age. And whether it's picking the color of socks or the costume, or whether it is pulling out his AAC device, which is an alternative and augmentative communication device. For us, that's an iPad with a communication program.
Yeah.
And whether it's him selecting if he wants to go to the park or the library or the store, um, how can we build in opportunities for a child, for our children to know that their opinion matters in their own lives?
Yeah. And it does. And giving them that opportunity to feel empowered. What a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it also feels good as parents because then you are getting to know who your child is. And when you allow yourself to get to know who your child is, and your parenting can stem from that
Mhm.
rather than compliance, we just have to get
Yeah.
compliance, um,
Yeah.
then you feel like a better parent, because I think you actually are a better parent,
Yeah.
because you're like, oh, I'm not making this up. I'm basing this on my child. And if my child wants to read The Snowy Day 100 times this week, which he does, we're going to read The Snowy Day a
Yeah.
hundred times because that matters to him.
Mhm. He's telling you what he wants.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's exciting.
It is. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
For those who are listening today and or watching today, what is the one thing that you hope that they take away from reading this book?
Of all the many takeaways in the book, the biggest thing is to get information about disability from disabled people. Whether that is taking 30 seconds to follow an organization or an influencer online, whether that is, being part of organizations, whether that is listening to podcasts in whatever form it takes. Um, Too often as parents, we're working so hard to figure out the best parenting thing. And there is conflict online and elsewhere between disabled individuals saying, here's how to do this, and parents saying, you don't know my kid.
Mhm.
And back to your point of holding two things at the same time, what can we be learning from one another so that we're not working at cross purposes? I do not have the firsthand experience to share with my son. Oh, here is how I felt as a disabled 10-year-old. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have that experience. And at the same time, I am living in my house with my kid and will be forever. So I'm not discounting my own opinion. And becoming educated by and from actual disabled people is actually really exciting and empowering.
Yeah, it's so important. The shared experience will take you so far. I mean, it really is. It's incredible. Kelley Coleman, I could spend all day dissecting this book with you because I think it's so important for so many families to read. So we're going to put a link in our notes for the podcast. The books, Everything No One Tells You About Parenting a Disabled Child. Please, it's an incredible resource. Go out there, grab it, read it. It won't take you long. I promise. You just soar
Yes.
right through it. So thank you for writing this book, and thank you for doing the work for so many families out there across the country and around the world who will be able to access this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And thank you for all the work that you are doing in connecting us and making us feel like we have agency as parents and humans, and we are not alone in this journey, no matter how rare or surprising. Feel listening to your show is like, okay, you got me, which
Yep.
thank you for that.
Yes, good. I'm glad. I'm glad that you think that too. And you know, same ocean, different boats. That's all we
Motion
it's
different
we're
votes.
just got to remember that we're all in this together. So, Kelley, thank you. I appreciate you so much, and look forward to seeing what you write next, because I'm sure there's something up your sleeve.
Thank you so much. There's much up the sleeve, and I look forward to sharing. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. All right. And if for our viewers out there and our listeners, if you want to take a listen to the rest of our podcast, this is season 4. So we're available anywhere that podcasts are available. We're also on our website, jordansguardianangels.org. And for translation services on YouTube, please check us out there for our families around the world who need to listen to this also. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time.